I'm the rookie, so maybe I don't have standing to do that. Tom has the breadth of 10 years experience. But you know, there is a whole crop now of parent activists who all seem to be very new. They're very sophisticated. And my sense is that this is a relatively new wave within the pediatric cancer sphere. And I think it's in part due to the internet and our ability to connect to each other. Cure Search was great. It was one shot, and there's some successes and some disappointments. And now there are 100 shots, and some will work and some won't. I think, you know, we're finding more families that are using their foundations not to provide social services, which of course are very needed, but actually to start weighing into research, which until now has been considered something that's very intimidating for a lot of families. Families are focusing on media. I've been focusing through Kids versus Cancer on advocacy, and I can tell you that it's a black hole in DC. My perception is that beside the Cure Search's effort through the Conquering Childhood Cancer Act, we've done very, very little, unfortunately. And there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot. I see a lot of parent activism out there. I really can't sing their praises highly enough. You know, Pat Lacey and Andy Mikulak, who have been very activist for a while, have pulled in a whole generation of new parents. And so take your patients, take the patients who have a little extra to bring and want to get involved, and you know, really encourage them to do so and tell them that it does make a difference. Because I think that in 5 years this will make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Hope so. Okay, and then there's 2 other questions back there.
I'd just like to make a few comments. Danong Chen and I are part of a private company, and we have gone to our congressmen and our Senate delegations to advocate in support of creating hope. So thank you, Nancy, for everything you're doing. We did receive a grant from Texas, state of Texas, CETF grant that does take equity in the company as warrants. So I see that model, Jeff, is expanding. Tom, I'd just like to make a comment. We've been, and the woman from the NIH and the NCI, we've been applying for other grants from the NCI and NIH, and in fact, wanted to get a neuroblastoma grant together for clinical trials, and ran into a bit of an interesting problem, or just something we noted. COG. COG is a monopoly. It's slow, it's inefficient, and it's highly politicized. I think we should all espouse for multiple consortiums and support from the NCI for other pediatric consortiums. I realize it's a small patient population, but I think it can be done. I think 2 or 3 consortiums outside of COG is perfectly reasonable, and I think healthy competition, especially focused towards translation, could be very beneficial. I think COG and NMTRC and other consortiums should incorporate pharmaceutical executives on their board, so that they can help translate both at the preclinical and the clinical, at the regulatory, the manufacturing level. This is critical. Academicians just don't have these skill sets. And then I'd just like to leave you with one last final observation that I think we should all maybe contemplate. And it's pretty radical, but anyway, I'll just plant it in your minds so that maybe you can think about it and tell me why it wouldn't work. I think the FDA, well, I'm a big believer in market forces. I think the way to unleash drug development is to let the invisible hand of capitalism and free market entrepreneurism take hold here. And I think one way to do that is to get the FDA back to its original charter, and that is safety, not efficacy, safety. Now, I realize every drug has, you know, a therapeutic window, and the safety is many times complicated by the efficacy. But if the FDA would just allow drugs to be sold based on a safety label and without any efficacy label until that company actually goes and does the pivotal study that's acceptable to the FDA. If they would just allow that drug to be sold, as long as it's safe, I think you would unleash an unbelievable market force. Well, if it's priced too high, it would not be reimbursed. So I think there'll be other controls there anyway. But I think everything's negotiable. I think the industry would certainly accept that in return for being able to get a drug approved based on safety. But anyway, something to think about.
It's a pretty radical idea, but there's some merit. Think about who's really the gatekeeper these days. Mark, you just pointed it's the payers. So, CMS and folks like that, they're not going to reimburse it unless it works. So they're going to look for efficacy and the science that backs it up. So it's an interesting idea. I'm voting for you for president.
Just from the efficacy, I mean, that's more than 50% of drug use in pediatric cancer is off-label, so there really isn't any efficacy. I think in smaller patient populations, hopefully that wouldn't be the standard of approval, at least.
Well, researchers are still going to have a big part
right.
of
There's
this,
still
right?
there's still plenty of data.
Anything unethical, and docs aren't going to just do something because it's there, unless there's a rationale for it. And you guys have a pretty high set of standards yourselves. So.
Yeah, I think you guys are doing a wonderful job. The symposium is very inspiring. I'm Dr. Mark Burns, and I come from a small biotech company struggling, trying to raise financing. And it's really, on the one hand, it's really a struggle out here. But on the other hand, it's a great time to be thinking about new opportunities. We're reinventing the drug development world as we sit here and discuss this. And one question I would have is, when would you send an invitation to somebody from the regulatory side to come to such a symposium?
We did.
Good. Okay. Yeah.
And actually, Dr. Lisa Mathis from the head of pediatric from the FDA would very much like to have been here, and she has been an incredible advisor to us. And she was giving a talk elsewhere, actually in Chicago right now, but then she passed this on to the orphan disease branch, and they said they would definitely be here next year.
Great idea. Yeah.
It was a little too short notice this year, but next year we will absolutely have the FDA here. And in terms of Dr. Thiel's, how can we increase exposure? Everybody here next year bring 5 people, and we all care, and we all know people who care about pediatric cancer. But this is, yep.
Just another idea to throw out there. Actually, Glenn Rice and I both had a hand in starting a nonprofit that's dedicated to try to make the FDA a better place. It's in Arizona called CPATH, Critical Path Institute, and it's dedicated to advancement of regulatory science on the process. They've created a lot of consortia, gotten the FDA at the table with every drug company pre-competitively to try to work on problems like qualifying or validating biomarkers that can be used to drive trials and things like that. I wonder if a pediatric oncology consortia could be put together where all the advocacy groups and the clinical trialists out there would contribute data. For instance, what they're doing something in Alzheimer's disease where they've gotten most of the big companies and the advocacy groups to put in, there's 14,000 patients worth of data right now into electronic database. They have CDISC, which is a data standards as a partner group, as a partner now, smashing it all together to try to understand the disease model better. And that then gets used to help push the FDA about what kind of trial is okay. They're at the table, you can dialogue with them, which is kind of rare. It's outside the scope of Mark or Glenn or me fighting with them about our specific drug. You can kind of get something done. But
So I have a question that's more science-based or clinical-based for the panel. With phase 1 clinical oncology trials of a new chemical entity, they're typically in patients that are terminal in essence. They're typically dosed to an MTD, and they're mostly looking at safety endpoints and pharmacokinetics. So my question is, I would imagine there'd be a fair amount of barriers within the pharmaceutical industry for testing a new chemical entity in a phase 1 trial in pediatric patients. where that drug has never before been put into humans. So I'd like to know if you've had experience with interacting with clinicians or with companies or patients, and that the issue of testing an NCE is significant, and the patient can't really sign a consent. It's rather the parent.
I guess I can take that one on. Have I had experience with that? A lot. Some good, some bad. I've done phase 1s in pediatrics where we had to stop the study because we ran out of drug. There's just no drug available anymore. And again, the normal paradigm is the phase 1 will start in adults first, and then we'll go, if there seems to be a relevant target expression within the pediatric tumors, it can go into the pediatric setting. It usually doesn't occur before the adults, but typically shortly after that, or at some point along that paradigm. The difficulty there has been, I'll say historically, if it doesn't show promise in the adult tumor, it tends to fade away. And that's where I ran into problems, where I was doing a pediatric phase 1 study, and I had to stop the study because there wasn't enough interest in the adult oncology arena to take that forward, so no more drug was made. So we had to stop the drug. So yeah, I mean, that happens. One key area that I'd like to see be changed as well, a lot of times great ideas come out of academic organizations like Van Andel. You may have a great new target that is not expressed in an adult tumor. Then what do? It's hard to find a pharma partner for something like that. Where I think we really need to make some changes as well is that as you move that drug forward, there are two critical hurdles. First, doing the toxicology and manufacturing. Probably one of the most unexciting areas to fund, if ever, in drug development. No one wants to fund toxicology and manufacturing. If you're in the company, you know exactly what I mean. So we need to be able to provide that type of funding, particularly to an academic organization or a research institute. And then the next key area is who holds the IND. Academic institutions run the other direction when you ask them to hold the IND because they're legally responsible now for that drug. So they have to find a partner in pharma who will hold that IND. So if there would be another way to create an organization that can hold the IND that would somehow indemnify the institution so they don't have to let that drug die or turn it over to a pharma partner, they may be able to take it even further than what anyone else would do. So there are a number of other hurdles, particularly when it comes to pediatric phase 1 studies we need to overcome. I mean, you're right, though, when it comes to signing consents. I mean, normally children also provide assent in their approvals or participation into a phase 1 study. I've certainly been in situations where the parent wants to go on to a phase 1 for their child and the child does not, and vice versa, where the child does not want any more therapy, but the parents do, or the parent, the child wants more, and the adult parent says no more. So it's a difficult situation, really difficult.
To add to that, I mean, I will say that I've been in situations where we wish that we talked a little bit about finretinide. That was a drug that Evan tried, and we wanted to do more, but we just were limited by the federal government's ability or willingness to give us more. And there were also, I think there's a lot of parents that where they know their child is dying that would be happy to sign up for a phase 1, but it's never been an adult or it's the federal government's protecting us from ourselves. And of course, it's easy to say if the disease does in fact kill your child, if you got the drug and it killed your child, then in hindsight you might switch around. So I'm sure they're cognizant of that psychology when they make these decisions for you.